Okay.
Hi,
So
my name is Ian.
people have asked me to watch this. It's quite a long video. It's the entire history of WoW. And is it time? Is it time to watch the entire history? 1 hour, dude? Yeah, it is kind of a long time. Okay. Alright, let's see how it goes. Camel FPS, thank you very much for the sub. I appreciate that. I haven't seen it at all. I didn't watch it myself, and I kind of saved it for this. Okay.
Hazikostas. I'm the game director on World of Warcraft.
Hi, my name is Patrick Magruder.
Hi, my name is Jimmy Doe,
I'm the lead gameplay engineer on the World of Warcraft team,
and I am the visual development supervisor.
and we are here to take you through the history of World of Warcraft.
Cool. Okay. Cypher, what's up, dude? I just want to let you know that scene right there of the mage, that is what made me play a mage back in vanilla WoW. Like, that was why I made the first character. It's because of this exact scene right here. I saw this, like, yeah, it's me. Yeah.
I joined the team in the summer of 2008. I've been at Blizzard for just shy of 10 years now. I've been playing World of Warcraft since day one back in November 2004. World of Warcraft
God damn.
presents players with a vast world to explore, to adventure in, to meet friends, potentially to make enemies. It's a place where players can play out their fantasies of being a hero and do
It's a
so
DK cinematic.
alongside millions of other players from around the world. It's set in the world of Azeroth, the home to the Warcraft.
Just a minute. Is the sound actually quiet, or are people just spamming louder? Just a second. Let me check. Well, I'm gonna wait for a mod. Can a mod tell me? Yeah. I mean, if it's not a mod, it's fine. Okay, good.
Franchise going all the way back to the RTS games of the mid-90s. It places players in the shoes of one of the denizens of this world. It's a world of swords and sorcery, a world of high fantasy and adventure. You begin with unassuming beginnings, setting off to make your name in a world full of danger and great glory to be earned. As you explore, as you do things like humble deeds,
Need help?
helping farmers with beasts that are attacking their crops, to unearthing plots
Peace, right?
that may have touched upon some of the major issues of the day in that world, you
Ooh.
gain power, you gain renown. In many ways, it's a classical fantasy role-playing game in a world full of
Okay.
thousands of other people. So as players grow in stature, they would take on more powerful foes. By the end of that initial journey, players were heroes in this world. Players had toppled some of the great threats facing Azeroth.
But what if
were
they
looking
just-
for new adventures, both in terms of the confines of the story, but
Okay.
also just as human beings playing the game. They wanted to see what was next, what great foe
Time out the Spurgs that are spamming.
awaited around the corner.
Okay.
Classic World of Warcraft was the base game. Before any expansions existed, this was just World of Warcraft as a standalone product that came out in North America in November 2004. It came to Europe some months later in the spring of 2005, and the rest of the world to follow. It really was this moment that united people who had been fans of the Warcraft RTS franchise, seized this excitement for the MMO genre, really opening up what had been a relatively niche genre to the broader audience of gamers from all walks of life. All
Okay.
ages, all backgrounds. It became something of a cultural moment. Back at launch, at the very start of World of Warcraft, there were 8 playable races and 9 playable classes. These
Yeah.
races, half were members of the Horde, half were members of the Alliance. On the Horde side, you could be an Orc, a Troll, a Tauren, or a member of the Undead Forsaken. On the Alliance side, you could be human, dwarf, elf, or gnome. And
Okay.
these were sort of the canonical Warcraft races
that-
players had seen and
was that
interacted
actually
with,
it?
going back to the real-time strategy roots.
Oh,
of the franchise.
there's
And then there were
Thrall.
character classes.
Sort
There
of
were a mix of
it's
sort
after
of
Thrall had the
traditional
dream.
fantasy archetypes and abilities that have been seen in the real-time strategy games. So you have the warrior wading into toe-to-toe combat, wearing heavy armor, wielding mighty weapons or a shield. The stealthy rogue, a hunter with an animal companion. Spellcasters, like a mage, master of the arcane arts or the elements. Warlocks, who are summoning demons and binding them to their will. will hybrid
Okay.
classes, like druids, who commune with nature and turn into various animal forms that they're in touch with. And then back then, there were two classes that were limited to specific factions. Only Horde players could be shamans, who were sort of hybrid melee combatants who also could harness the power of the elements, as well as totems with a certain ritualistic, shamanistic vibe. And then on the Alliance side, paladins, warriors of the light, who combines
Okay.
a mighty sword arm with invoking the light for healing and supportive magics.
That
And
armor
so
was
all
for
in all,
warriors.
there were 9 character classes playable, 8 available for the Horde, 8 available for the Alliance. Which was better between Shaman and Paladin was a major point of contention.
No, it
back
wasn't.
then, and
Paladin-
It depended on who you asked.
Paladins
Most would
were
say
better.
The grass was greener on the other side of the fence.
Paladins were better. It's just there's no question.
One of the pillars for World of Warcraft was having a largest broad appeal. A lot of games were pretty realistic in terms of the aesthetics. A lot of MMOs were based off of token fantasy, realistic medieval kind of setting, and we knew we wanted to develop a style that was different than what was being done. We looked at Warcraft, which is the roots of what World of Warcraft
Arcommando.
is. And they had established a style that was very colorful. It pushed a lot of exaggerated shapes, created heroic characters, epic environments to craft adventures and epic stories. And so we knew, like, okay, if that's the root of Warcraft, we would take that and use that for the aesthetics of World of Warcraft, making something that was very memorable for the players.
From the first moment when it came out, back in 2004, there were indications that it was going to be a somewhat different game than the ones that had come before. There were countless people lining up around the world on release night to get their hands on the very first boxes. Blizzard actually found themselves quickly unable to meet the demand just from a server perspective, just in terms of the sheer load. Blizzard had planned for
It was a
conservatively,
big load.
actually, what if more people come to play this game than any other past MMO, games such as EverQuest and competitors at the time? Even those expectations and projections weren't enough to meet the initial demand.
Oh wow, that's the
When
original.
WoW first came
it's
out,
like
it was
alpha.
100% what server are you on was everything. If you were on Mal'Ganis, you could only interact with people who were on Mal'Ganis. And we realized very quickly that while Mal'Ganis itself is overloaded, that's okay. We're going to get that capacity up, and then people are going to want to do more. So we wanted to figure out how can we enable players to play, because World of Warcraft is about playing the game with your friends. It's about doing things
What?
together in a shared world, and how could we get that experience moving forward?
A lot of those first months were spent really just trying to keep up with demand, just trying to stabilize the service to get to a point where players could just come home from work, log in, and not have to wait or not have their servers be down due to load. I was just a player back then. I bought the game the very first day it came out. I want to say
What a
it
nerd.
was Thanksgiving weekend coming up. I remember coming home excitedly, logging in that first night, playing, and then could not wait to get back to the game the next day.
Yeah.
Only to discover that my server was offline and was one of 5 servers that were going
See,
to
well,
remain
just
offline
look at his
for
face.
the next
You know
2
he was
days.
mad.
They were so hopelessly
Still mad.
overpopulated, they couldn't run with any sort of stability. So I had a little enforced initial break from the game. Once they got up and running again, we all jumped back in and picked up where we'd left off. In many ways, that was the story. It was a testament to how magical that experience was back then, despite pretty frequent downtimes, long periods of lag and instability, poor responsiveness, not because of any technical shortcoming of the game, but because of the unprecedented player demand and the load that was hitting the servers. Everyone realized they were
Huge.
part of something magical that we had never seen before in a game. We definitely got bonus points as a game just for those unique social elements, whereas now the ability to interact with others in your gaming experiences is taken for granted. Almost every console, PC, mobile game
it's
you pick up
taken
and
away
play
from you.
is going to have some of those interactive social elements. What World of Warcraft has done over the years is add new ways, new modes of engaging, new places to visit, new worlds to explore, and has really provided
Bashir.
just this ongoing, engaging gameplay experience that leans on the uniquely social nature of the experience. So whether you are joining up with 4 players, 20 friends, or making new ones to go take on a powerful dragon,
guy
explore
got hit.
dungeons, or test your skills against other players, it's a game that's really been able to build itself from the ground up as a fundamentally social game. At the same time, it's a game for everybody. It's a game that from its earliest days was one that could be played alone. If you were looking for just meditative, peaceful exploration, if you didn't want to deal with others, you wanted to come home after a long day of work and explore a tranquil elven forest, do good deeds there, that was the game that it could be for you 13 years ago. That's the game that it still can be for you today. In many ways, that really is the story of classic World of Warcraft before any of the expansion. The first year was one of stability. Then the next year was content updates that were more traditional in the sense of modern content updates, adding new environments to explore, new bosses to defeat, new dungeons to conquer, and some balancing to the game, and adding some additional features like fleshing out player versus player combat. All of those things came in over the course of the base game. That really just set the stage for the expansions to come.
Burning Crusade, boys. That was a good day.
The first expansion we created was the Burning Crusade, and it was pretty challenging from a visual art direction standpoint because it was very different than what was created for classic WoW.
This was the first major expansion to World of Warcraft. Players journeyed through the mysterious dark portal to the broken world of Outland, which was the home of one of the major races that is found in World of Warcraft, the Orcs. This was a whole new world to explore, with its own cultures, multiple zones, new dungeons, new enemies. It massively increased the scope of the game.
You guys only got 18 mounts.
We spent a lot of time thinking about the aesthetics of it. We got the story and the design, and oftentimes that's kind of first inspiration for the art is we get a rundown, okay, what's kind of like the gameplay for the expansion, the story arc, and maybe some of the characters. And then once we find out about that, our imaginations start going wild. We start to imagine how could these worlds look like? It was coming up with like all these brand new worlds, literally another planet. It was really cool and really fun to do. And it was another opportunity visually to create different experiences.
It also brought with it new features, such as much more formalized, structured, competitive player versus player combat, new races to play, the Blood Elves and the Draenei, for the Horde and the Alliance respectively, access to new classes that hadn't been around before, new abilities. In the truest sense, a significant expansion of the base game on all vectors, along all lines of progression.
It was
good. More to do, more to earn, more to seek, more to explore.
It was good.
A lot of the initial systems of the game have been fleshed out over the course of the classic World of Warcraft period. Burning Crusade really formalized them into permanent structures. Raiding was an activity that involved, groups of back then 25 players getting together and taking on some of the most challenging foes in the game. Burning Crusade also introduced a 10-player raid size so that somewhat smaller groups could still have that epic experience without needing to get together a full number of 25 people. The arena system was added in Burning Crusade, which allowed players for the first time a chance to match themselves, match their skill
to get very angry
from around their region to determine who was the best truly and
to hate the game
in the process. That was actually also the beginning of World of Warcraft eSport.
The World of Warcraft World Championship.
Back then, fledgling eSport League started to broadcast WoW Arena tournaments.
Play that Resto Druid and keep his team barely alive, crazy deep into dampening.
Crazy.
There's a lot of excitement around seeing the best from different countries go head-to-head against each other to determine who the best World of Warcraft players were in the world. Rewards became more streamlined, better tuned and balanced, whereas it had been the Wild West previously. And one subtle addition to the game that really laid a foundation for the next decade to come was a system that the World of Warcraft team called daily quests. Previously, quests had been something to guide players through the game's content. A lot of massively multiplayer games prior to World of Warcraft didn't have much structure to them. You would go out into a zone and be expected to just find enemies and defeat them, often repetitively for long stretches of time, to get stronger, to get items, and grow in power. World of Warcraft overlaid a thorough network of level-up quest lines.
The Naru have not forgotten us.
Telling stories.
State your business.
Giving you purpose to your actions.
The reckoning is at hand.
The reckoning.
And guiding you through the world as you explored it. In the classic game, those quests pretty much came to an end once you'd reached level 60, the maximum level in the base game. Burning Crusade raised that to 70, but it also added this whole new set of daily repeatable quests that were only available at max level, that were randomized and varied, and would give players a new thing to do, new quests to explore and pursue on a regular basis when they were logging in. It made outdoor gameplay a staple of the end-game experience in World of Warcraft, rather than something that you just did while leveling up. That's something that the team has really continued to expand upon, and it's now really a core pillar of what makes the franchise what it is. Introduced for the first time in Burning Crusade was the ability to fly around. You could, at max level, earn flying mounts that let players for the first time soar through the skies, get around the world a bit more quickly, a bit more easily, but also open up literally a whole new perspective on looking at this expansive world that before had been seen, from beneath the tree canopies and much closer to the ground.
flying was fun for both of our teams
Oh,
because
yeah.
we had to figure out how to let characters fly.
One of the new methods of art that we did was introduce skyboxes, because in Outland, you literally saw Great Dark Beyond. You saw energies breaking through space and creating these nebulous clouds in the sky, and it was very fantastic. And we had to kind of develop a new technique to sell that, and we had done a
Swirly
lot of
weird
really
shit.
awesome visual development on how that stuff could look like. Now it was the time to kind of translate that and actually execute on it. So we implemented this new skybox system that we didn't do in Classic WoW. That was very exciting.
One of the big questions was, how fast can they fly? At the time, our servers had a whole lot of interaction limitations on how fast a player could go. If you fly too slow, it feels kind of lame. So you wanted to go nice and fast, but how fast is too fast? Well, how fast can we fly through this world?
Can't go
How can
too
we make it
fast.
feel good? Because if you fly too fast, you end up and there's nothing below you, and then things are loading, and it's not a great player experience, right?
And you miss all the cool stuff that we
You're right,
ended up
and
making.
all the cool stuff that Art's put in, you don't see until it loads in or whatever. And
Classic WoW, we created a lot of cool worlds, like different zones, biomes, each with their own very distinct aesthetic feel and look. But we never really had to think too much about transitions when you transition from one zone to the next. There was certain paths that we know players would take to go from one zone to the next, and we could control that and make that a very nice blend in transitions, like say a snowy forest to more icy mountains. And there were areas where we didn't have to really worry about transitions at all, because players never were able to get up there unless they were able to somehow like climb all the way up the mountains. But
He's talking about
the introduction
hackers.
of flying mounts,
Go
that
anywhere.
was huge. It really changed the way we built zones and different landscapes and design visually the landscapes too. We now had to actually think about transition zones and how one landscape transitioned into the next one, get it to feel right and feel correct in order to sell the fantasy.
That actually makes a lot of
what we're trying to
sense.
do.
all the way down to what the view distance when you're
Yeah.
here, how do we deal with fog, how do we deal with lighting, all these things suddenly became more of a problem once the player was elevated and able to see from Terracar Forest over to Hellfire and see the line and see the between them. You had to
Yeah.
make these beautiful transitions, whereas before it was kind of hidden.
Where my personal story begins as a member of Blizzard, as a member of the World of Warcraft team, was on the eve of WoW's second expansion, Wrath of the Lich King.
Oh yes, dude.
You shall be king.
That's the best one. This is the best
As
one,
someone
dude.
who played the game ardently, it was an honor to be able to come work on the team to help shape the game that I'd loved for so long. Wrath of the Lich King took players
Yeah,
to the frozen wastes of Northrend, an area also introduced and with its roots in the lore of the real-time strategy games, to
Yes.
face off against Arthas the Lich King, probably the greatest, most notorious villain ever introduced in Warcraft.
That's right.
To your masters.
This also introduced an all-new character class, the Death Knight, as well as systems such as vehicle combat, which played out in this massive battleground called Wintergrass.
That people didn't
Advancements
play.
to the raiding game, the expansion of daily quests as a system, integrated cinematics in some cases, having powerful single-player moments where you could see the world around you transform. There was new technology that the team had invested in around this time called phasing that let players' actions, in effect,
come
influence the
on.
world around them. So whereas before there was always a pretty heavy element of suspension of disbelief, where you would rescue a prisoner from the villain's lair and have the prisoner thank you, but then because of the conceits of the massively multiplayer world, a couple of minutes later the prisoner would be back in their cage for someone else to rescue because it was just a shared world. Whereas now for the first time, you could take over an enemy base and have it turn into a friendly one for you yourself. You could see the results of your actions played out in the world at large. And this was used to great effect in storytelling in elements such as the Death Knight class starting experience and elsewhere throughout Wrath of the Lich
That
King.
part did
so
make
a
sense.
live game with such a rapid iteration cycle is the ability to come in, do something at my desk, put something into the game, and then literally see players reacting to that thing 10 days later in our public test environments, or back then our beta servers. That's an incredibly rare privilege. I didn't realize at the time, as someone that was sort of new to the industry, new to the environment, just how rare a privilege that was to have such a tight, creative, iterative loop and rapid feedback. Over the course of Wrath of the Lich King, we continued to expand upon features and tried to create new ways for players to play the game with each other. And one of the biggest changes ever introduced to World of Warcraft was the Dungeon Finder feature.
Ah,
added in
no!
patch 3.3. It was a matchmaking
No!
service. It was something that's probably pretty routinely found in games today. It allowed you to quickly find other players interested in doing the same content that you were looking to do. Rather than standing around town looking to manually form a party of adventurers to go into a dungeon, you could just say, I'm a damage dealer looking to do a dungeon, enter yourself into the system, and the game would find you 4 other players of the right group composition looking to do a dungeon as well, and put you right into the action. We have various character classes in World of Warcraft that occupy different roles. We have tanks, whose job it is to sort of stand up in the front and absorb the brunt of the enemy's attack. Healers, who keep the tanks and the rest of the group alive. And then damage dealers, who are the ones who dish out most of the damage to defeat the enemies that are confronting the players. A balanced group requires 1 tank, 1 healer, 3 damage dealers. And putting that group together could often take manually upwards of 30-40 minutes. You'd be standing around saying, all right, there's 4 of us ready to go. We just need to find 1 healer and then we're good. And then maybe someone has to go or someone has their internet go out and you're back to square one. What the Dungeon Finder was and what its promise was automating this process. It massively decreased the barriers to entry for this content, led to far more players than ever before participating in the dungeon gameplay that is some of what makes World of Warcraft special. I feel World of Warcraft does it just about the best there is. This revolutionized the way people played the game, and it remains a linchpin of the game for the past 10 years. Shortly after the Dungeon Finder was added, World of Warcraft was integrated into Blizzard's Battle.net platform, which is its cross-game communications platform, allowing players for the first time to chat with their friends who were playing at the time StarCraft 2, Wings of Liberty was just about to come out. That would later expand to include Diablo 3, Overwatch, etc. So today, players through Battle.net can chat with their friends on other servers. That functionality is only continuing to expand as people play games throughout the Blizzard ecosystem.
Another feature that we added in Wrath of the Lich King is the dual spec system, or dual talent system. That one was born of many folks realizing, hey, this is kind of a pain point, because especially the hybrid classes, when you talk about your paladins and your druids, and other classes as well, who can play different roles. Do you want to go to a dungeon and you want to have a good group, and to have a good group, you need to have that balance of the 1 tank, 1 healer, 3 damage dealers. So a player would go, hey, I'm playing a druid. I'm currently a resto druid, so I'm a healer, but we need a tank. I'm going to go switch. Hold on, everybody, I'll be back in 15 to 20 minutes. That really wasn't fun, because you had to go back to town and spend a lot of money, and suddenly all your spells are different, so you have to change your action bars all over the place. My solution for action bars was I had screenshots on my desktop of this is what I look like as Holy, this is what I look like as Prot, and this is what I look like as Ret.
I did this. Yeah,
I'm just hitting the 1, 2, 3, 4 key. It's all wired in my head at this point for playing. I don't remember what that spell is. I just know that 2 does what I want it to do, and then I'm like, we can do better than that. So we eventually envisioned dual spec. It started as how do I save action bars, and it turned into what it is now.
Deathwing has returned.
So that's the whole game, and pretty much ended after Wrath of the Lich King, and we killed the Lich King. It was great. Azeroth was saved. The Scourge threat was ended, and World of Warcraft's, it came to a close, and it was just a great game, and it was a great 8 years or so, and
Cataclysm was the most ambitious expansion Blizzard had ever made up until that point. Cataclysm set out with a massive undertaking of actually breaking the world. So it told the story of this great dragon, Deathwing, who burst forth from within the earth and unleashed chaos and catastrophe across Azeroth. Areas were flooded, areas were broken apart,
huge
massive crevices appeared. But what this provided was a vehicle to remake the original world that had been crafted in 2004.
To ruin.
In fact, in many cases back in 2003, during the pre-production development of the game, to embrace some more of the modern conventions and the technology and the way that the team had come to build content by 2010. As Cataclysm raised the level cap, as it introduced some new features, new professions,
Interest you on a pint?
it also took the unprecedented step of going back and remaking everything that had come before. So the entire level 1 through 60 experience and all of those zones were fundamentally transformed, both visually, art-wise, but also in terms of the stories that were being told there. The timeline had advanced, there were new characters occupying those spaces. It was a truly radical transformation of the world.
And art, we had to look at the old zones. Okay, now it's all being destroyed. How do we actually make it look cool and chaotic, but not too chaotic. Now that we're going back to some of the classic zones, that was the start of actually up-resing some of the aesthetics of the classic areas. So we started looking at all the assets that we made, all the trees and all the tile sets, and we started to slowly update some of the zones, and that is kind of like the start of the art in World of Warcraft, where we slowly started to update more and more.
That was when we decided, it's time to start upgrading all this stuff.
Yeah, and engineering has been big on that because they've worked on how to streamline the WoW engine so it could run more smoothly, more efficiently, and allow us to actually add more polygons and more high res textures. And now we could upgrade the visuals.
Okay.
When the initial trailer was announced at BlizzCon, seeing side-by-side juxtapositions of areas like the Thousand Needles, dry, barren area dotted with tall stone spires, turned into essentially a giant lake, or the Blasted Lands that had been utterly ruined by the opening of the Dark Portal. The potential that it created in terms of revisiting and re-experiencing content that had been around for years that players may have thought of as something in the past.
Some of the other challenges we faced is one of those things you don't tend to think about as a player, but we have all this data for the world as it is in Burning Crusade and in Lich King, and now we have all this data for the world that is very different in Cataclysm. How do you get some of that data to what we call propagate when you make a change here? Because we're still supporting the live game as we're developing Cataclysm and making changes, but that was one of the bigger technical challenges that we faced, was how do we manage all of this data?
I have no idea what he's talking about.
Because we literally just changed something like 90% of the world.
I don't know anything about this.
Numerous NPCs, you name it, it changed in Cataclysm.
Wow.
It's pretty big.
Yeah.
Huge.
The most difficult thing with making Cataclysm really was revamping and rebuilding the outdoor world. There were a bunch of maps where the team went through, drew up maps of all of the existing zones that had been in the game from its earliest days, and they color-coded them. Green, yellow, red. Green zones were, okay, these are the ones that they're pretty fine actually, we're not going to do much to them. Maybe some minor tweaks here and there, we're going to leave them as is.
That's actually a smart way to do it.
More heavy overhaul. And red is pretty much complete redo from the ground up, including art, level design, and the stories being told there. But once the team embarked down that road and started with the red zones, they realized, one was that it was very challenging both visually but also storytelling-wise to have the old and the new side by side, and second, that once we cracked open that door, the team as a whole had an appetite, they're a group of perfectionists. And suddenly, before you knew it, some of those green zones were becoming yellow, some of those yellow zones were becoming red. At the end of the day, almost the entire map ended up being completely redone. So what set out to be something more surgical ended up being an almost complete reinvention and recreation of the base game outdoor experience. That was, even to this day, I'd say, probably the single largest task the World of Warcraft team has ever undertaken. There are definitely some technical challenges. The process of actually sundering the world out from under players. We basically needed to have two separate versions of the world in parallel.
How do we sunder the world out from under the players, make it believable, and not mess everything up in the process? Because when they logged out, they were above the ground.
Good question.
And when they log in, the exact same position is now inside of a mountain or inside of a fire pit. Or they're high up in space because there's now a crater where they were. One of the original requests from design was kill all players on login. Told me, hey Pat, we get to kill all the players. Wait, what?
That's a good idea.
One of the initial thoughts was, why don't we just kill everybody and move them to a graveyard? And I'm like, oh, come on, we can do better than that. So we did.
There was a lot of challenge in handling that situation. The transmog system, transmogrification, transmog for short, that was introduced in Cataclysm, this is something that has made appearances later on in Diablo 3. It's been recently expanded upon during our Legion expansion. It's a core part of the way players experience the game today. The basic premise of this system was the ability to take the armor, the weapons, the equipment that you're wearing as a character, apply the appearances of other pieces of equipment that you have. Whereas previously, people strove to obtain the most powerful items in the game. There's a limited set of gear that might come from the most challenging dungeons, the most challenging raids. In the long run, most players looked pretty much the same as each other. Maybe some differences here or there. Everyone's long-term goal was this fixed state that negated and undermined a lot of the sense of individuality and self-expression that is part of what's most exciting about the MMO genre. Transmog, it's ultimately glorified dress-up, but it's awesome. Now suddenly, rather than a whole bunch of identical-looking clones standing around the city, you saw a mix of colors and looks. For many players, collecting outfits and collecting appearances is one of the major motivating factors they have in playing the game. They will go back and do old content. They will do things not for the story, but for for the cosmetic rewards and the appearances that that content yields. It's just a reminder of how profoundly important the concept of self-expression is to the genre. The raid finder or looking for raid system that was introduced in our 4.3 Dragon Soul content update, that was essentially an expansion of the dungeon finder that had been introduced late in Wrath of the Lich King that allowed players to be match-made into forming even larger groups to tackle our raid content, which let more players than ever before experience some of the game's most epic battles, of course at an easier difficulty setting so that they could see the story, face the villains that were the ultimate antagonists in the world. Unlike some past expansions that had only had one raid at the start, Cataclysm came out with 3 separate raid zones when the expansion first released. And now this is the 10 or 25 player, large-scale
There's actually 4.
content,
Baron
intense
and Hold.
collaboration, people proving their skills, proving their ability to work together to overcome the challenges in front of them. When I think back to the first few months of Cataclysm, I think back very fondly to the time that was spent with my friends, with my guildmates, going through those raid zones.
For my kind, the true question
Oh no!
is, what is
No!
worth fighting for?
Come on. Just skip this part?
Mists of Pandaria was, in many ways,
terrible.
It was a deep breath. It
The
was an interlude,
worst.
following on the heels of
Ever.
a series of expansions where there's a great villain
Dog
and an
shit.
existential threat to the world. Mists of Pandaria was getting back to the original spirit of World of Warcraft, a vibe of exploration and discovery. There wasn't any immediate villain or existential threat facing the world.
Yeah,
It
there
was.
was.
About this mysterious new landmass, Pandaria, shrouded in mists, that had been discovered. And yes, the great forces of Azeroth, the Horde, and the Alliance both mobilized. They wanted to explore it, they wanted to understand its secrets, they wanted to lay claim to its treasures. They were both embarking upon a journey of discovery. Mists of Pandaria marked an advance in our storytelling, weaving months-long, in fact years-long, narrative arcs through our content. Through the many content updates that Mists had, we introduced brand new characters, developed them into villains, introduced new heroes. It was a time that began with peace and tranquility, but ended with all-out war.
Mists of Pandaria was one of our strongest expansions in terms of art direction. Oftentimes we play off of classic motifs, whether it be classical fantasy archetypes or real-world archetypes. Just from the very beginning, we knew we wanted to very heavily influence on Asian landscape. But that wasn't enough, right? We kind of like put in the Warcraft flavor in it and just took it to another level so that players could just get immersed in it and craft their own adventures in this new fantastical world.
First time I saw Jade Forest, I couldn't believe that I was looking at World of Warcraft.
Yeah,
it's like,
it's-
whoa, these mountains, oh my goodness, it was incredible.
Yeah. World of Warcraft already has a very colorful aesthetics, and
Yeah.
this one we just pushed it even further.
Yeah.
We were able to do like these really nice blends and transitions that weren't possible with this new tech.
Go look at like Kunlai Mountains and such, wouldn't look the same without that.
I like this.
And that's just a
Yeah,
constant
I like this
evolution of not just the art style, but our technique and our how we work too. Because with the ambient occlusion, now artists didn't have to paint shadows and fake shadows within our textures. We actually allowed the engine to do that for us. So it
That's
saved us
wizard
a lot
shit.
of time. So now it was awesome.
You're telling them all the tricks.
Mists of Pandaria had 4 content updates, and in many ways, looking back, that served as a model for what we've done most recently with Legion and what we'd like to continue to do going forward. After initially exploring the continent of Pandaria, the first content update in 5.1 took players to the coast of Pandaria as Horde and Alliance forces had both set up small bases there and were clashing with each other for control
Operation
of the territory
fucking
and the resources
shield
within.
wall.
The second patch, the Thunder King, took us to
this was
the
good.
Isle of Thunder off the coast of Pandaria,
This is a
where
good
we
one.
were introduced
This
to an
one was
all-new
good.
villain, the leader of the Mogu race called the Thunder King, and the Zandalari trolls who were his allies. This was a huge chunk of content with many quests for players to explore, guided linear scenarios that were used as a storytelling device that had not previously been done. Probably the biggest or second biggest raid zone we've ever made in
Leslie
World of
Shin.
Warcraft's history.
They brought him back to life.
From there, over the course of the next 2 content updates, the story veered back to Azeroth, to the conflict growing within the Horde as the Horde fought against the Alliance. In the final update of Mists of Pandaria, Garrosh Hellscream, the war chief, the leader of the Horde, one of the 2 major factions in World of Warcraft, and a character the players had first met back in Burning Crusade in Outland. He had taken his pursuit of power in the name of the Horde a few steps too far, and wittingly or not, had turned into a tyrant, and sparked all-out war where not only the Alliance, but his own faction worked to overthrow and depose him. So the final raid zone of the expansion, the Siege of Orgrimmar, was an epic 14-boss journey into the depths of the Horde capital
Lasted
of Orgrimmar,
for over a
culminating in
year.
battle against Garrosh Hellscream himself. Garrosh
That's how
Hellscream
epic
was
it
the
was.
first that was born entirely within World of Warcraft.
Yes.
All of the others, Illidan, the Demon Lord Kil'jaeden, the Lich King Arthas, who I mentioned
Jaraxxus.
earlier, all of those had their roots in the real-time strategy games, and especially in Warcraft 3. Garrosh Hellscream, he was born in Outland in 2007, and that was a poignant and important character arc. It marked the first time that a major villain like that had been created within this world and played out that full story arc within it. When we build a new expansion in World of Warcraft, first and foremost, we're creating a world. The player's the star of the story, but the co-star is the world. It's not about any specific character, any hero, any villain. It's about the setting. It's about the mood, the atmosphere, the environment. What comes with that, of course, are new types of races, new allies, new cultures, and so there's definitely a lot of Asian inspiration behind the continent of Pandaria. Players met races like the mischievous, monkey-like Hosen, the wise Jinyu, and, of course, the sagacious, but occasionally boisterous Pandaren. One of the strengths, one of the unique things about the expansion was that it didn't have a villain. That actually makes it harder to convey to players in some ways, to introduce from the outset. It's much easier, more approachable to wrap your head around, well, there's the bad guy who's on the box. The purpose of this expansion is to go kill him or her. It's more challenging when it's just go to this place, making sure the players didn't feel purposeless without the clear objective in front of them, and instead felt encouraged to just explore.
I actually prefer that.
Secondly,
I prefer
in
that.
Mists of Pandaria, we added an all-new gameplay type that we called scenarios. So previously we'd had 5-player dungeons.
Those are the things that didn't work.
Scenarios were meant to be a bit more bite-sized and organized for 3 players.
Speak up.
And didn't have specific role requirements. So I mentioned earlier the concept of tanks or healers or damage dealers. Scenarios could be done with any group of people that you had. The idea was grab a couple friends, jump in, have some fun. One of the hardest things we can ever do in World of Warcraft is pioneering an all-new type of content. I think once we have gotten experienced making a sort of content, we learn lessons, we learn from experience, we build upon that, we refine, we try some new things within the confines of a structure that we know. But when we're setting out to break those rules and try something all new, there's just a lot of challenges, and it took a lot of iteration, and really a process in many ways that continues to this day, that began back then to nail the right gameplay for this scenario game.
Yes.
Have you fought these things before?
I never liked
There were a number
scenarios.
of people who were turned off by the theme, by the motif of the expansion. They saw Mr. Pandaria, they saw these pandas,
it was dumb.
Pandaren race, that though in fact they dated
I
back
didn't
to
like
Warcraft
it.
3, they looked at it and said, this isn't the Warcraft I know. The Warcraft I know is about orcs and humans and dragons,
right.
and this feels like a different game. This feels almost childish. In retrospect, many of those players would say those who passed on the expansion for that reason made a mistake. Players who gave it a chance, who got into the story, quickly discovered that it actually was one of the most complex narratives and beautiful environments that World of Warcraft has ever presented to this day. As players today discuss what was your favorite expansion, what was the best expansion, Mr. Pandaria tends to figure prominently in those discussions. What an expansion means is more of everything that you like, but also something new. A new angle, a new approach, a new way to spend your time in Azeroth. New zones to explore, new quests to complete, new dungeons to conquer. But for a long time we had these little companion pets, critters, scattered around the world. And in many cases players could collect them and you could summon your pets. We had the idea of making a fully fleshed out system.
Making them kill each
that
other.
Incorporated those companion pets.
That's a great idea.
And gave you something to do with them. And that something was training them, raising them, battling them against each other, battling them against your friends' pets, and battling them against ones in the outdoor world. It was this whole separate meta progression that really gave some legs and some depth to the collection game that had just been purely superficial up until that time. And it's something that was a big hit and miss, and that we continue to expand upon to this day.
More like a hit and miss.
One of the challenges that the engineering team has been working towards solving for years is removing barriers between players. We started with cross-server battlegrounds. We moved forward with what's called CRZ, cross-realm zones. Instead of being on only your home server, you could potentially end up on another server. And if you invited a player to your party, suddenly, bang, you're in the same group together. Cross-realm dungeons, with the introduction of the looking for raid, looking for dungeon tools, we realized it didn't make a lot of sense to limit those only to your server. We want you to be able to pull from the region populace so that your queue isn't as long, especially if you're out on the highest population server. You might be waiting a while for that tank to show up or that extra DPS to show up.
What Gul'dan must
This is
we
the
give
best
in
cinematic,
return?
dude. This was so good.
Everything.
Warlords of Draenor. It came out in the fall of 2014. It was technically visiting the same space as we had visited in Burning Crusade, just in a different time period and a different timeline. This marked the beginning of story arcs that weave from one expansion into the next. At the end of Mists of Pandaria, we, the heroes, toppled Garrosh Hellscream, leader of the Horde. But we didn't kill him. He was imprisoned, was going to stand trial. Instead, he managed to escape with the aid of some powerful allies, opened this portal back to Draenor, to the origins of his race, the origins of the Orcish people who would later become the backbone of the Horde. He was disgusted by what he'd seen around him and was resolved to take a different path this time to achieve the destiny that he felt he deserved. As I mentioned earlier, the star of an expansion is the world. And this was a case where the story was an excuse for us to get players into this world we wanted to share with them. This is the world of Draenor, the homeland of the Orcs, as described in instruction manuals written by Chris Metzen 24 years ago, and an awesome place that was at the heart of Warcraft lore that we've never been able to show players.
It did.
The Orcish race that they now know in Azeroth originated in this world, scattered across a harsh climate, mix of desert, frozen tundra, lush jungles, different
They didn't even
tribes
explain you
that
went
had
back
their
in time.
alliances, had their conflicts, and a whole new host of enemies and allies. And players were plunged into the heart of this world as they had to navigate its dangers, be the heroes that they're always meant to be. The major feature of Warlords of Draenor was what we call the garrison system. Now, the conceit here was that players at this point are not just regular heroes, they're actually commanders. They've risen in stature in the world of Azeroth to the point that they're actually in a position to set up a fort, set up a defensive emplacement, and command others, lead a literal army in pursuit of their shared goals. One of the first things players did when they arrived in Draenor was claim a plot of land and begin to construct a few buildings and recruit a few followers. The garrison was a persistent space of your own in the world that you could customize as you saw fit. It also introduced some asynchronous
It could have been
gameplay
so
elements
good.
where you would have an army of followers that you would send off to complete missions. You would choose to customize and level up your followers and pick the best ones to counter the threats posed by certain missions to maximize your likelihood of success. You might send them to explore a cave
What he means by that is download the add-on.
and that would take 12 or 18 hours real time. You might go to work, come back home, log in at the end of the day, and your followers would have returned from their mission and you could see the results. For the first time, there was a way of having events in the game unfold while you were away from the game. It was used to further both the storytelling and players' fantasy as not just a hero in their own right, but a commander of other heroes. Late in Warlords of Draenor, this isn't really tied to a specific expansion, we introduced something called the WoW token. What the WoW token is, it's a way for players
to make more
exchange with each other time for in-game currency. The WoW token is a real-life asset that can be purchased and listed on the auction house within our game. You sell it to another player, that player gives you gold, that player can consume the token, and add a month of game time to their account. Now, the reason why this exists, the purpose that this serves is twofold. First off, with the popularity of World of Warcraft over the years, there was a lot of interest in in-game assets, in-game currency. There was real-world value to the time that players had invested in making their characters wealthier and more powerful in the game world. There was literal illicit black markets selling in-game currency for real-life currency. The way a lot of the bad guys got this in-game currency was by hacking accounts, compromising accounts, and a bunch of activities that were really negatively impacting the game for all players. We recognized that there is this demand. There are players who want to buy gold, they want to buy in-game currency, but the only options available for them to do it were harming the game. So the WoW token effectively killed two birds with one stone. It gives players who want to spend money to get some in-game gold a way to do it by transacting securely and safely with other players. On the other hand, it lets players who have a lot of gold effectively play the game for free. They can subsidize their game time by spending gold on WoW tokens, and what is ordinarily a subscription-based game, they can effectively earn their right to play it for free, at least for some given number of months, depending on the gold they have.
Well, the largest feature of Warlords, as has been mentioned, was garrisons. It was also one of the most significant technical challenges because up until then, in the server technology side, we had a thing called an instance server, which is where you would go to run your dungeon. They were set up to handle 5-person, 10-person, 25-person, 40-person. It had a bit of an overhead for that. Suddenly, the design realized we were going to need millions of garrisons at the same time. That's a big technological challenge that we, number one, embraced, and I think we succeeded at, but it really laid the groundwork, actually, for the future sharding technology that came in Legion.
The sharding
led
technology?
To such a smooth launch. We have been successfully driving the technology so that players never feel like they're waiting for the world to catch up. They're never waiting for the world to populate. There's always people in the world, yet we can launch a massive success like Legion with its millions of players on day one, and it doesn't feel overpopulated. We just split them apart.
Legion expansion came out in end of August 2016. Legion is a head-to-head confrontation with one of the core enemies in the Warcraft franchise, the Burning Legion. They're demons. We fought them in the Burning Crusade.
They're assholes.
First expansion over 10 years prior. They've been a primary villain throughout the real-time strategy games. So Legion saw them assaulting our world. As opposed to us going elsewhere, rifts opened and powerful demons came through and we were fighting for survival across Azeroth. To do this, to have a chance of even standing up to them, we needed to seek out new aid that we'd never gotten our hands on before, in the form, first and foremost, of artifact weapons, which all players began their journey through Legion by seeking out and claiming. Now, these were 36 fabled weapons with unique backstories, unique art, and a deep progression system that players could seek out and claim as the special weapon for their class, and it would be, their source of aid and strength in the face of the Legion. The artifact weapon served two main purposes in our minds. First off, it's incredible fantasy. These are some iconic weapons in the Warcraft universe that we wanted to get into player hands. There's a reason why, when you look at Legends, you think about the Sword Excalibur and the number of fantasies and stories that have been told around mighty weapons is something that resonates.
But only King Arthur had Excalibur.
This feature, in some ways, reflected
that
lessons
XX Arthas
learned
DK.
from the past dozen years making World of Warcraft prior to that. We built artifact weapons as a feature that was going to be tied to the Legion expansion. Players will not carry their artifact weapons forward into Battle for Azeroth and expansions beyond. What that meant was we could really double down on the amount of depth and complexity and power that could be earned through this system in a way that we never would be able to if we were signing up to continue to support this for further expansions. And the concern there isn't effort on our part, it's more about the complexity of the game's balance, just how overall bloated it might get with years of layering new systems upon new systems upon new systems. We've decided to make more of our mega features limited to specific expansions, like the garrison that you built up in Warlords of Draenor. That's still back in Draenor. You can go visit it whenever you want, but it's not something that you brought forward with you. We're not updating the garrison as we release new content updates. Your artifact weapon was your trusted companion throughout Legion. Now, of course, we're always looking to learn lessons and take the most successful elements of those features and carry them forward in the design of the thing that comes next, just as the garrisons from Draenor heavily inform the design of the class order halls in Legion. These were shared spaces. These were effectively clubhouses for members of a given class.
I like this.
All the warriors would go hang out together. The rogues would scheme and plot in their secret lair beneath the city streets. The classes would work together to overcome the Legion threat. Legion was an expansion that doubled down on class identity like never before. We, on the visual aesthetic side, revamped a lot of mechanics of our in-game combat to make them just feel more dynamic, more punchy, more visceral. We, of course, introduced the brand new hero class, the Demon Hunter. If we were ever going to make this class in World of Warcraft, this was the time to do it. Their purpose in life is to fight demons. They're elves who've sacrificed great things. They've sacrificed everything in order to gain the power to fight demons. They turn their own powers against them. The most dynamic, highly mobile, almost action gameplay class that World of Warcraft has to offer. They attack by dashing through the battlefield, leaving blazing trails in their wake, offer in some ways an all-new way to play the game, playing a new class like that. And in the case of the Demon Hunter, that was one that was paying off really 15 years of build-up, going back to Warcraft 3 and seminal moments in World of Warcraft's history, like our Burning Crusade expansion, where we first introduced non-player character demon hunters that players could see and fight against.
One of the significant additions to Legion was the Legion Companion app. It was one of the first times that the World of Warcraft team had made an app for iOS and Android. It allows you to play your order hall while not playing WoW. We thought this was a very reasonable but awesome extension to the game itself. Back in 2004, it was perfectly normal for a person playing an MMO to sit down for 4 hours. That was kind of expected. These days, a lot of folks don't necessarily have as much time. They got families, they got kids. Sometimes they want a more bite-sized play experience. World of Warcraft has so many ways to play. You can play everything from these short, bite-sized experiences to those long epic
kids
sessions
don't
if you'd
play
like.
video
It's all
games
about
anymore.
playing the game how you want to play it. One of the most stunning visual aspects, I believe,
4
for
hours.
Legion is the significant improvement we've made to the draw distance. What I mean by that is how far you can see. This is any player of World of Warcraft playing Legion. You stand in Dalaran, or you fly over Dalaran now, and you look out towards High Mountain and you see all of Suramar beneath you as you look towards there. That distance is really far, and all that stuff that you're seeing, that would not have been possible in an earlier version of World of Warcraft. There's just too much stuff there. It was through some significant engineering effort and significant art effort to make that possible, and I think really sells some of the most fantastic vistas I've ever seen in World of Warcraft.
That
when
is
you're flying in from the north over High Mountain, and you see the Tauren city down there in that valley surrounded with the river. Oh my goodness, so awesome.
Yeah, that just goes to show like just a constant evolution of just
Yeah.
like the tech and the art. Now that you can see far, like 2 zones away, it really changed the way we design zones and just aesthetically how we come up with visuals for the different zones. We emphasize more time and effort into just art direction and visual design for all our landscapes now, because we knew as players they can actually see into the distance and see we could compose shots better, because like each one you could actually see literally the transition from the zone you're in to the next zone that's right next to it to the zone that's next to that one. So that was one of the big challenges for that, just be able to come up aesthetically designs that work in tandem.
Legion effectively had 6 content updates: patch 7.1, 7.15, 7.2, 7.3, with .5s in between, alternating between major content releases that took players to new outdoor zones, gave them a new raid to tackle, a new dungeon. Smaller releases added rewards and more evergreen background ways of playing the game, with systems such as micro-holidays, periodic events that happen throughout the calendar year that give players unique ways of engaging with the game, or an expansion of our time walking system that lets players revisit old content for current rewards, massively multiplying the number of dungeons or raids that you might have available to do in a given week. We were able to deliver content updates at a pretty regular cadence throughout the lifetime of Legion, with the goal of players always having something new to do or something just around the corner to look forward to. That was an ambitious challenge that we took on as a team, but I couldn't be more proud of the team's effort in delivering on those goals.
We have paid the price for sharing this world, and we have forgotten what makes us strong.
Battle for Azeroth is the upcoming next chapter in World of Warcraft. It's coming out this summer. And if Legion was an expansion in many ways about character classes, Battle for Azeroth is a return to the roots of the franchise. It's an expansion about factions. It's an expansion about Horde and Alliance, this binary identity that's been at the heart of the franchise going back to the RTS games in the 90s. Players are going to venture to the new continents of Kultiris and Zandalar in search of aid and new allies, as Azeroth as a whole is plunged into war. Horde and Alliance are at each other's throats. They're fighting for control of the planet on which they live, and they're at a stalemate. They've reached an impasse. Players are at the forefront of this conflict. Whoever can get the upper hand will control the fate of Azeroth. At the same time, there are dark threats that aren't necessarily in the foreground right now that threaten to destroy the world that we're fighting over, even as we're fighting over it. As players venture to these new lands, everybody knows allies, they're also going to begin to uncover mysterious threats and secrets that will need to be explored and understood. Otherwise, we risk losing the earth beneath us, even as we're fighting to claim control of it.
One of the things in the new expansion that we're working on is the Islands Expeditions. I think they're going to be a truly remarkable new experience for the World of Warcraft player, and for the player who hasn't played World of Warcraft before too. One of the things that I'm super excited about is the new artificial intelligence we're adding. When you start up an Island Expedition, it'll be with you and 2 other people, harkening back to the Mists of Pandaria 3-person scenarios where role doesn't matter. You and 2 other friends get together, you sign up, you get on your Island Expedition, and it'll be you 3 against 3 cunning, smart, well, depends on how smart you want them, you actually can choose, artificial intelligence bots that are trying to beat you to the same objectives you're trying to get to. The other thing that's truly exciting about them is it's in randomized content. We've worked very closely with the art team using assets that we have developed over the entirety of World of Warcraft to make these islands be populated by buildings and creatures that will feel familiar but not always be the same. They'll be different every time.
One of the really exciting things we're doing for this one is going back to what is the foundation of Warcraft, and that is essentially Alliance and Horde coming together and being able to go back to the foundations of what makes Warcraft, but also updating it, so modernizing it. How does old Warcraft look now with the new designs and the new art direction?
Yeah, it's definitely about the Horde comes in and they're establishing a base, and the Alliance says, "No, you're not establishing that base. We're going to burn it down." Or the Horde says, "We're going to build a base here. Alliance, get the heck out." We go back and forth like that. It's all about the war, and that's what it's called.
Get the heck
out. It's going to be 20 players, and you and 19 other people get together and go take out the other faction.
We're putting the war in Warcraft.
There you go.
Oh.
World of Warcraft, it's been an incredible journey. Me personally, it's been the last 13 and a half, 14 years of my life. First as a player, and then more recently as a developer. And could not be more excited as a team to push the boundaries of what we can do in the MMORPG genre, to create worlds to explore, new adventures to have. We have incredible stories left to tell. Each new expansion we add to the game, we're looking to expand the core of the game the players have come to know and love over all these years, but also add brand new ways of playing the game, new features, features,
Oh,
types of
Twitter!
gameplay, new
Yeah.
challenges to undertake, and a fresh look at a game that seeks to reinvent itself every couple of years as we update the game.
That was the scene, dude, right there. So, did I see what I thought I just saw? Did I see classic WoW in the launcher here?
We have incredible years of my
Reporting the war in Warcraft.
Just a second. Let me turn this down. Did I see classic
World of
WoW
Warcraft, it's been an incredible journey. Me personally, it's been the last
just a
13
second.
and a half, 14 years of my life. First as a player,
50
and
seconds.
then recently as a
Oh. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Yo, what if Ian is actually just playing on Northdale? Like, he's just playing on private server. I don't know about that, dude. That'd be fucking hilarious.
developer, and could
that's
not be more
crazy.
excited as a team.
Wow, I guess that, what is that there? I guess that must be like Stormwind or some like Stormwind-esque area. Oh, is that the garrison? Oh, it's not even the garrison. I don't know what the hell that is. Yeah, the old garrison, Stromgard. Oh, is it Stromgard? I don't think it's Stromgard either. I don't know what the hell it is. So, I feel like this was pretty good. What did you guys think? I'm impressed. I actually like this. WAD login. It wasn't the WAD login screen. I know what it is. Like, it was not the WAD login screen. Let me see if I can click on it and show you. That is not the WAD login screen. Because the dark portal was faced from the other direction. I can guarantee it's not the WAD login screen. Also, it was much more red. There's no way that one was WAD. You can see green on the right. No, you can't. There's no green on the right at all here. This is the classic WoW login screen. I'll bet $1 million on it. It was. Yeah, it was classic, man. I can guarantee it. I mentioned DKs, but didn't mention monks at all. Yeah, I was really happy about that. I was glad they didn't talk about them at all. There was just no reason Legion Alpha used that login. Well, the thing is, though, is that they used it here, and that means that Classic is going to come out next week, probably next Wednesday. I'm assuming. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, there you go. Check out Super Suka's video. You're just spamming that over and over, and it makes me not want to. If somebody spams the same fucking thing, regards English 5 login screen remastered, plus there's no Mulgore behind WAD portal, that's true too. Yeah, you're just asking the same thing over and over. It's a default login screen for builds. Nah, bro, it's classic. Nah, bro, that's classic WoW right there. That's classic WoW. I know it. Okay? I know it. Would you agree that Legion was a step in the right direction? No. I would not. I would not. I think that Legion had a lot of good things. Legion had a lot of amazing things. But I don't think that it was actually a step in the right direction. I think it was like... So here's the way to look at it, right? Is like, let's say you're on a mountain and you jump off the mountain and you die, and that's WAD. And you take one step out of the one step up the mountain. Is that like really a good step? Like, yeah, obviously like, Legion might have been a step, but it was from such a low point to also still a low point. If anything, it was one step forward, 2 steps back, right? Whereas they added in a million different types of content, but all of the content is unrewarding because the acquisition method for all the rewards is completely random, so players have no control over their success. So people don't get any fulfillment or satisfaction out of achieving anything, because nothing that they do is because of them. It's because of some sort of RNG mechanic. So yeah, that's how I feel. I mean, really. Wait, what? Blizzard only. I don't even know what the hell you're saying. What the fuck, dude? No, I'm being serious, man. How am I? Yeah, how is that true, or how's that not true?